Hello guys, Patrick here, Egg Not Poker. I'm going to be doing a new video today, something a little bit different actually for today's video. I'm going to be looking at a question that I've been asked quite a lot over the last couple of weeks when I've been doing and uploading content for poker. The most frequently asked question that people have asked me is, how do I study poker? How do I get good at poker? I mean, I've had people explain to me, I watch videos, I've heard about solvers, I may or may not have done coaching before, I'm stuck, no matter what I do, I don't know how I can improve. How can I improve? How can I study? What is studying? Do I go to university and go figure it out? No, there is an answer to it, okay? So with avenues of improvement and study tools and different mindsets on how to improve at poker, there's no right or wrong answer. So technically, yes, you could argue that you could potentially take the avenue of going to a professional coach or coaching program that could look at your game. They could show you all the different concepts of like GTO, fundamental strategy, exploits, etc., so on and so on. You know, you've also got the other ideas of potentially going and doing studying self-study with solvers, etc., which is extremely complex. There are easier and more accessible and potentially cheaper as well options out there on the market to help you, to help me, to help everyone improve at poker and actually be able to literally improve by studying at any level of skill, whether you're a complete beginner, whether you're an intermediate player with a small win rate, whether you're like a really, really good player with a strong win rate at like mid to high stakes who's just looking to improve in any avenue of their game. Not only solver work is needed or potentially coaching, but it can be expensive and it can be really tough, and also it's not very accessible. And even if you have solvers, you have to learn how to use them, and then you have to know how to efficiently use them in terms of your time and how to get the most out of what you do and the sims that you do and the different hands that you sim and the different commands, etc. A lot of people are going to watch this video and they're going to be like, that all sounds great, but I have no idea what any of that means, and I'm interested in learning how to improve at the game, but I don't want to spend hundreds of pounds, thousands of dollars, whatever, on a coach. I don't want to buy a solver and then try and figure it out. I want to just study. I want to be given some ideas and concepts of how to improve. So one of these study tools, one of them is called GTO Wizard, which some of you may have heard of. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. Some of you may not have done. And what GTO Wizard is, it's basically, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, because it's kind of like a massive brain with all these like kind of pre-solved scenarios and lots of different types of study tools, all kind of like jumped up, pushed together and thrown into this massive cauldron, as it were. And you've got all of these different options available to you to study with. And it's absolutely phenomenal. And for me, personally, over the last 2 years, my game has absolutely, exponentially just completely improved at a very, very fast, quite terrifying rate. I'm not saying I'm a death crusher, but what I'm saying is going from a small win rate with or without rakeback to all of a sudden starting to, to climb stakes relatively comfortably. And it kind of feel like I kind of understand things a bit better, without having to pay thousands of dollars for long-term professional coaching. This piece of software is absolutely amazing. And what I want to do in this video, guys, is just explain and show you, literally physically show you some of the things in this piece of equipment that is so good and really efficient and is absolutely going to help you start to progress. No matter what level of the game tree you're at, even if you're at 2NL or if you're at 200NL plus, it doesn't matter. You can still take concepts from this and improve. So just recently, I've actually become an affiliate partner with GTO Wizard. So what does that mean? That means that at the end of this video, should you be interested in purchasing this item, And you absolutely should start having that as a consideration if you're looking to find a tool to improve and to do some studying off tables to elevate your game. I can get you 10% off your first purchase. We'll look at like prices in a few bits later at the end of the video, but I can get you 10% off on your first purchase for any new users who might be interested. The link is which direction we're looking at, just here. So that's the code there. I'll also stick it in the description. Anyway, so we're gonna stop blabbling about that, and we're gonna actually get into GTO Wizard itself. So if we want to become wizards and sorcerers, which we absolutely do, I don't know about you guys, but I'd love to fire lightning out my fingers. Let's start looking at some of the tools that GTO Wizard actually provides. So for me personally, when I first started using this tool, the first piece, I kind of jumped in and I had no kind of clue what was going on. Then I started having a few trial and error sort of type of spots with a few things. I was kind of like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't really know where I'm going. But then as soon as I started putting a bit of time into it, I actually really started enjoying it, and it was really, really good for me. So basically, if you're interested in studying off table, what Wizard provides you as a home screen here is lots of different options. So first of all, what I would suggest is, again, this is for anyone, whether you're at the lowest or the highest level of the game, is just look at the basic studying solution tool. So what we can do, and you can do this as a free user, by the way, you don't even have to purchase GTO Wizard to download this and just look at some basic ranges, is you can for free start looking. We can click study here, and we can actually just start looking at some of the matrices here, so that all the different types of combinations of hands that we might be opening and using. So for example, I'm a free user. I'm actually, sorry, I'm a premium user, but I'm just saying, if I was a free user, let's just use that scenario to begin with, I can see these. I'm allowed to see these matrices here, and I can start to use the practice tools, and I can use some of the other tools, but you're limited to what you can use and how far, like post flop, etc., you can use them for. And then when you do, if you do purchase the software, depending on the level that you purchase, you can then do more options as well. But these are completely free. So I would just urge you, even if you don't purchase this software straight away, go and download it. It's completely free. It's extremely easy to use for the ranges and the hand matrices here. Look, I can just, like, for example, what I would do is I'll go on study here. I can click on this box here where it says cash. I can choose which type of cash game I might be looking at. So for example, do I want to do a 6 max cash game chart? I've got 9 max here. I've got heads up. There's also some straddle and anti variants here as well. I can scroll over to what stack depth I want to be doing. And again, depending on your product that you purchase, the level of availability will increase. For example, like a premier user, etc. I can also then scroll over to type, and on type here, all I'm going to be doing is I'm literally going to be just seeing how complex do I want these avenues and study matrices to become. So for example, if I go on general here, I can just see with the description. I can also look at the accuracy as well, which is for people who start studying solvers. You should look at how accurate your study sims are going to become. That's somewhat relevant for higher level users, but for just entry level users who are completely new to solvers or databases of pre-solved content, you can look at the main thing for you would be sizings. So for example, if I went on the general tree here, and I'm going to go to NL50 rake, that's what the rake structures here are. NL50. So for example, if I'm doing PokerStars 6 max NL50, I can see on the general tab that it's going to have 3 to 6 sizings. So that means is when I go post flop, it's going to give me different options of what sizes I might want to choose. So for example, general's really, really nice for entry level users, or you can even go to simple here, and it'll also just kind of reduce the amount of post-flop sizes. It'll also just make some of the sims just a little bit more simple and easy to just look at and break down. You can go complex here as well. That's an interesting one. That's what I actually started on, which is not the best idea, because that's got up to 19 sizes, which is kind of crazy. What will change, just as a bit of information for you, is depending on the type of sims that you want to use here, whether they're general, complex, etc., the ranges will slightly differ and they will slightly change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to 6 max cash, 100 big blinds in depth. I'm going to go to the general tab. These will be with the pre-flop preferred sizes. If I wanted to, I could also go to general with a 2.5x open, which we're going to do for today. So let's go to the 2.5x open. And you can see like in red here, what types of hands I would open. And in blue, for me, for the color chart that I've chosen, would be fold. Okay, so for example, like our RFIs, our raise first in, we can literally look at, I can look at UTG here, which is obviously under the gun. I can click this, I can see what ranges, types of hands I would want to open. And on this study tool, I can literally, just as an absolute basic, I can literally just see the ranges that I might start using. Obviously for your games, if exploitatively, you will start increasing these or decreasing these with the amount of nodes that you may use depending on the player types you're against. But in terms of like entry level game theory optimal study and theory concepts, it's just really, really good to just have a real basic understanding of what types of hands you can open. So for example, if you're playing like 2 and L5 and L10 and L16, no, you shouldn't be looking at GTO to become some kind of like, oh, I'm just going to learn GTO and that's going to make me crush 2 and L. Not quite. But what you can do is you're going to have questions where you're going to go, I don't know what ranges of hands to open. Well, so what hands do you think I should open? Well, we can look at Wizard here and just say, right, under the gun, minimum hand opening, like King 5 suited here, for example. Do you open hands as wide as this? You know, like, or are your ranges a bit too tight, for example? I'm not saying this is the exact range and set in stone for all time, but at least as a very, very basic piece of information for you, you can see what types of hands you might want to open. So for example, this is where the rabbit hole starts going a bit deeper, is not only can we do the RFIs from all positions, if I just start clicking further down the rabbit hole, we can see that we're folding and folding and folding, and then I get to the button and my range is now increased. So for example, I can see that with this strategy, I'm opening 42% of hands. You don't need to know I'm opening 42% of hands. You just need to know roughly what types of hands you're opening for the very, very beginning of your studies. For example, if I was to move this over to the general tab and I go to the button, it is pretty similar, but some of the ranges may just slightly differ. But it's just based on, you know, a lot of it's based on like what, like the larger you open, the tighter you're going to be. Whereas the smaller you open, the wider you can start becoming. When you start looking at these RFIs, this is absolutely going to elevate your game from the absolute most basic level. You can just start looking at what types of hand rankings are quite good and quite optimal, or you don't need to know the whys to begin with, but at least the whats. So I know, for example, under the gun, from looking at this chart, I know that suited connectors from like sort of mid to low rankings, let's say like 9-8 suited and below, for example, are just not favored very often at all. So as you can see, you should start adopting more of a kind of like polarized strategy where you kind of like look at your opening lots of like suited ace X and king X, etc. You're not really opening any of these sort of weaker ace X or king X and below. You're mainly sort of pocket pair heavy from sixes and above. You've got the suited king X, suited ace X, lots of sort of linear, strong, suited broadways, etc. And then as you obviously get wider and wider with the tree, as you can see, the blood is starting to spread throughout the table and we're starting to open more and more hands. Green here would be limp or call, depending on whether it's pre-flop or post-flop. At micro stakes and low stakes, even mid stakes to some extent, a limping strategy perhaps may not be the best, because depending on the rake and also the types of player pools that you're against, but that's for another day. But green here, pre-flop, means call, blue is fold, and red is raise. So what I can do here is looking through as a kind of tutorial. So let's just say I open under the gun, okay? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open to 2 here. The big blind, let's say calls. We can click on the big blind, by the way, and we can see how the big blind would react. So I can start looking at what types of hands the big blind might defend versus an under the gun open. Okay, so for example, in green here, like the worst type of hand I might be defending is something like 4-5 offsuit at some frequency. Now, bear in mind that because I've opened to 2 here, that 4-5 offsuit is in there, but had the villain open to 2.5 or open to 3, for example, you would start to tighten up some of the weaker parts of these defense ranges, just as a general sort of piece of info for you. The thing because Wizard is like a kind of big mind, it's a big brain, it's a big database kind of thing. Instead, like, you're not physically creating a range for your opponent. You're kind of using a preset GTO versus GTO standpoint, kind of like you're battling and locking horns at the highest levels. What you want to get from this piece of software, depending on the stakes you play, primarily is you want to start learning what types of hands you might be opening, what types of hands are going to be 3-betting and 4-betting, what types of hands are going to want to be aggressive. When you're starting to get post-flop, you're going to start looking at things like c-bet sizes, etc., 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 which is some of the stuff we're going to look at in a little while. And you're just learning you're just starting to look at what the type of matrices do and why and what configurations, and looking at the rough sort of frequencies. You're not, if you're playing micro stakes, you're not going to sit here and just absolutely sponge in everything in the first 30 seconds of learning. It's going to take a long time, but at least you can physically look at, from the basic level, what types of hands and to open and how to defend, how to raise and how to play, and you can start building these kind of fundamental, you can start answering questions, like these fundamental questions that, say for example, I'm going to use myself as an example here. I'm going to chuck myself like 3 or 4 years ago. I just had so many questions, I had so many leaks, I had so many issues, but my most frustrating part of that was ignorance. I couldn't ask the question. I couldn't say, right, what types of hands should I open under the gun? I don't know, so like this is going to start giving you some answers, which is really, really, really good. Anyway, so moving on, not only do we have these pre-flop solutions, we can actually start moving post-flop as well, which is fantastic. So let's say UTG has opened, the big blind has defended. We can move over to the tool here that says flop, and we can actually input a specific flop, or just have a general flop, like a random flop. It's up to us. So say for example, let's put a flop out here. So let's go with the ace of spades, I don't know, the 10 of hearts and the 6 of clubs. It doesn't really matter, I'm just using it as an example here. And we're going to move over to the next action, which would be the big blind, because the big blind's out of position and obviously and is going to act first. So what you can do here is you can click on the big blind, which is this box here, as it's the next part of the story. And what this will do is, again, this will tell you what the big blind should be doing and at what frequency. So on the left side here, you've obviously got all of your different hand matrices. And then over to the right here, let's click one, for example, King 10 suited. And that will kind of lock this in so this doesn't move. And I can look at the combos of King 10 suited, how many combos I have, what bet size I might want to choose, what frequency would I want to use it as a bet or a check, etc. And you can just start sort of seeing how you should start playing and with what types of hands, etc. So the big blind should be checking almost always here, for example. So let's go with what we're being told to do. Let's check. And now the UTG here is going to have lots of different sizes. So for example, what we can see here is, if you hover over with my cursor to the top right side here, is you can see all the different sizes that our solution has chosen. Okay, so remember with Wizard, it's going to give you the predetermined sizes used in this predetermined scenario that's already been solved. So for example, these are the options that we can choose from here in the general. If we use something like the simple or the complex scenarios of the Sims, we'd have more or less options to choose from depending on which one we wanted. Okay, so let's have a look here. So what's the most preferred c-bet size for under the gun? Okay, we'd be checking something like just under 5% of the time. Okay, so we know that on this double A-side double Broadway board rainbow, we should be doing a lot of betting as the aggressor under the gun, and it mixes a lot here between large size, medium size and small as well, so all sizes. Let's go with half pot here. So I can click any box I want to with the different sizes. And when I do that, you can see that the matrix will automatically filter which types of hands in this range that will want to bet 50%. Okay, because I've clicked the 50% button. So I can see that King 6 suited here will want to bet 50% or half pot about a third of the time. Yeah, so we bet 2.25, which is 50% of the pot. And then that action would be 31.5% of the time, okay? You don't need to know every single frequency. You don't need to know the exact size of every single hand. It's astronomical. It's not something you're going to be able to do. However, what you can do is you can just start seeing which combinations of hands want to do what in what types of scenarios. So for example, you can just say to yourself, right, I know when I'm raising under the gun and I can see these like ace-high double Broadway boards, I should be quite aggressive with them because my range really interacts works with that, and that's what I should be doing as a basic level strategy. So for example, again, let's just pick a random option. So let's say we bet 3/4. How should the big blind react? Well, there's lots of different options here again, okay? And this is how we just want to start using this tool to say, right, what should we do here? So how should the big blind defend? Should we call with let's give ourselves a random hand here. So for example, let's just say the big blind's got, I don't know, pocket tens in this configuration. So let's find pocket tens here. Here we are. So let's click on pocket tens to lock it in. That means we don't lose anything here. Nothing moves. We can see the combos of tens that we'll get here with. Obviously, we can't have the 10 of hearts because that's on the board. And we can see what pocket tens or a middle set would want to do in this configuration. So again, we've got the option here in this particular scenario to do everything. So we can raise to different sizes. We can raise to 100%, 100% pot, 50% pot, or we can just call. And we can have a look at what types of frequencies we want to be doing. Okay, so this is what this is as the study chart. This is one of your primary ways of using GTO Wizard. So for example, had you played a hand, okay, you can reenact that hand after the fact, put it into this solver here, and look at how the predetermined simulation would have played that hand. You can follow it through. So say, for example, we're in this configuration. Let's just say we bet a third. Sorry, the big blind checked. We decided to bet a third with whatever hand we had. The big blind called. The turn was the 5 of diamonds. The big blind checks. And here we are. We can actually say, right, well, I checked here with aces, for example. I don't know if that was correct or not. Let's have a look. We can click on aces and it will start telling us roughly what we want to be doing here and how much of the time. And then again, we can just start looking at this and using it as a study tool. It's very simple. I mean, it's a lot to take in for someone who may not have ever used solvers or anything, or knows anything about any types of study tools. It's a lot to look at. This is a lot of information to look at from an entry-level user, guys. I can appreciate that. But when you start having fun with it and messing about, you start getting into it pretty quick. I can promise you that it's quite fun to use and it's quite interesting to use. Definitely, it's really, really good. So let's just to show you, there's an X button here that resets, and that will clear the browser history for you, so you can then reset. And at any time, you can change the streets without having to reset the whole thing. So for example, obviously if you want to reset the first action, that would change the whole tree, obviously. But if you want to change any previous trees here, you can just go back and do so, and then it will only just reset the parts of the tree up to where it was. You can also just change the sizes post flop without having to do everything all over again as well. It's really, really, really good. So that's the basic entry level of this sort of study matrix tool here. There are loads of other different options that we won't go over today. Okay, we're just going to go over some of the main points of how to use Wizard and what types of functions and options it will give you and why it's such a good tool. Okay, so what I can do here, if I click on strategy, click on the drop down menu here, there's loads of other different options. So again, it depends how far down the rabbit hole you truly want to go. If you're a kind of level user right at the level 1, never used any of this type of information at all, never really used charts, never really looked at solvers, have absolutely no idea what you're doing effectively, just keep it on strategy here and just start to learn what types of hands you might want to open. What you can then start doing is, when you start studying at a higher level, is you can look at what type of EV, like estimated value, you can expect from certain types of hands when you're opening them, or when they're doing certain actions pre-flop and post-flop. So you can start seeing the EV of hands being opened, etc. I can have a look at also equity realization, EQR, what types of blocker scores, etc. I might have post-flop. So for example, if I'm in a scenario where I'm choosing which hands I might want to use as a bluff, or which hands I might want to call with, I might want to use the blocker score, which is basically when I get post-flop, it will tell me how strong blockers I have and how good they are to use when considering either a call or a raise, or etc, etc. With the range as well, let's just go back to the general tab here. When you're playing post flop and you get to some of the post flop situations, here we go. you can start looking here. If I click on ranges, is again, this looks even more complicated, but I'm just showing you as a very, very basic level here, is who's basically got the biggest stick, who's got the most types of hands, who's got the, so when we're looking at percentage of hands here, so we can see which either villain or hero has the most hands, who's got the bigger range of hands, who's got the bigger amount of nutted hands, who's got the nut advantage versus range advantage, etc. You can just start seeing, so when you get to certain types of scenarios, you can say, oh, actually, I get here with a lot of really bad hands, whereas villain gets here with a lot of, quite a more of a condensed range with, and they've got a bit of an advantage here, or their range might be better constructed than ours. You can start seeing this and using that as a bit of an ideology of when you're starting to do strategies and when you're starting to look at the ranges in the sims that you use. It's a lot to take in straight away, but I'm just going to show you here that you can start seeing also breakdowns. So for example, if I'm in a scenario here, so this specific scenario is the small blind open, the big blind calls. Small blind checks, and we're here we are in the big blind. We can see what types of hands we might get here with, and what specific types of hands, like straights, sets, two pairs, etc. And you can start seeing what they might want to do and how often. So for example, in this scenario where the small blind raises, we defend the big blind. Small blind checks to us, here we are in the big blind. We've got let's say we've got a straight here. We've got queen 10, for example. We'll click on straight here. And then we can see, as I'm scrolling across, you can see the suit changing. It's just looking at what roughly we want to be doing with different types of hands, and also what types of suits, etc., and blockers that they have. The shield here, if I click on this, the shield is the blocker score. And again, for premium users, you'll be able to see this blocker score better. For starter viewers, they won't be able to see this. But it's another piece of very relevant information. But you can just start seeing what types of hands want to do what in different scenarios, and so on and so on and so on. If you're new to this software, I would mainly focus on just having strategy, okay? Where you can just say, right, this is the type of hand I had, this is what I did, and I can go over after the hand is done, and I can see how the computer would want to play my hand against this opponent in that scenario, rather than just looking at all the different ranges of hands, okay? And you can just start looking at them. And you can use that to then answer your questions for yourself. I'm not telling you this is just going to automatically just make you a cyborg, but what it's going to do is it's just going to start eliminating some of the ignorance that comes with poker, because poker is so complex, okay? So what else do we have as well? The next one here is reports. So for it depends on the level of your subscription. So for example, if you've got a free subscription, the entry level free subscription or the basic one, you'll only be able to see certain spots with the reports, the range reports. And then when you start going into the premium level, you can start seeing more like turn-based reports and all scenarios. So what does that mean? If I click on reports here, click a post-flop spot, confirm. What I can do here is I can just start seeing, give me a second. I want to look at strategy, post flop. Give me 2 seconds here. Here we go, reports. This is what I'm looking for. Select the post flop spot. UTG, big blind. Okay. So what we can do is we can just start looking at what types of hands want to do what, and how often in positions as well. So for example, we can say like ace high boards, king high boards, queen high boards, different scenarios and positions. You can just start seeing what your range of hands would want to do in certain scenarios. So for example, here on the reports, we are UTG open and a big blind defend. The flop comes out, we're here in the big blind. Should I check here? Should I lead out? What should I do and how often and with what types of hands? Look, we can scroll across here and I can choose how the board is constructed. So for example, if I was moving across here on these like low paired boards, for example, or low connected boards, as you can see, just over here is where it's moving. You can just start seeing how your range might want to slightly change, whether you want to be leading out or checking, etc. And then as for the UTG C-better, which is obviously probably the most important part of this as an example, you're saying, right, I'm under the gun. I've opened pre. The big blind has defended. I want to study what the under the gun player, myself, would want to do in all the different types of scenarios post-flop. I don't just want to look at one spot. I want to look at a report for all the different types of flops. What the hell do I do in all the different types of scenarios? Here we are. So now I can start looking at different types of board textures for the UTG and how my range wants to start being constructed based on what boards come out. So for example, if the boards come out ace high, for example, you can see here that the ranges would want to change a little bit. You know, like we're checking quite a lot here on these sort of ace X boards, ace low boards, for example. Whereas if we go to like king high boards paired, for example, start moving at some of these, you can just see that things slightly change. So for example, let's go with king deuce here, for example. Now I don't want to be checking because I have such a strong edge here with my range that I actually just want to be betting quite consistently for a small size. Whereas on some of those ace high textures, you can see like these ace high dry boards here, ace six deuce, for example, I kind of do a lot more checking and small betting rather than just sort of mainly betting my range. That's going to go over your head a lot of the time, and this is going to take a bit of work to and a little bit of playing around with to start using and learning fluently. Okay, but it's another type of study tool. So these reports are so good when you're trying to learn. I'm here, I want to c-bet, for example, or I'm facing bet. What should my range do on these different types of board textures? You can literally just scroll through them and choose which types of board textures you want and start figuring out what you want to do and how often you want to do it. It's so good. So these reports are another type of study tool that you can use as a GTO Wizard user. So let's go back to strategy here. Now, my favorite part of this tool is actually the practice modes, and this is what we're going to look at next. Just before we do that, one other part of your study tool here that we have just got to quickly go over is the weekly coachings. So there's lots and lots of different sponsored players for GTO Wizard and provide content for it. As a premium user, you'll be able to have a look at the previous content provided. This is for the premium users. Like, oh, these are all the previous ones. This content is absolutely fantastic. It's absolutely golden. Hours and hours and hours of content here, which is all at your fingertips as a premium user. Okay, so this is really, 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 really good for you. So this is all here. This is for cash, for MTT, etc. It's really, 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 really good. Just remember, it's not only for cash. If you're a tournament player, all you have to do is switch it over to MTT and away we go. Just one disclaimer though, if you are primarily a cash game player and you want to start looking into tournament play, etc., that's for a separate plan. So you'd mainly if you're a cash player primarily, you would purchase the package for the cash game, and then if you were considering the tournaments, that's separate. Okay, so it depends what type of player you are. If you're mainly focusing on a certain bit more of a specialist towards MTTs or spin and goes, heads up, sit and goes, etc., 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 all you do is you simply look at the options available to you to be purchased and go from there. But a lot of the pre-flop stuff you can actually just use anyway, which is quite cool. So moving on is actually the practice mode. So this is, for me, I love this stuff. This is awesome. This is so much fun. So what you can do is you can actually now start literally simulating certain spots. So for example, if I said to myself, right, you know what? One of my biggest leaks is the blind battles. I'm absolutely terrible at playing in the blinds. What do I do? How do I do it? What's going on? I've looked at the study tools and that's gone, I just want to play. I want to physically be drilled. I want to be beaten up and thrown about. What can I do? Haha. This is one thing that GTO Wizard does exceptionally well, is it enables the user to actually specifically choose certain areas to drill. So if I choose Hero and GTO for both small blind and big blind here, I can choose a pre-flop spot, I can start post-flop, or I can choose a specific custom spot. Let's go with pre-flop to begin with. Let's start with RFI, raise first in. I can go to advanced settings here if I want to. And all this is going to do is allow me to set up all the different options for this drill. Do I want this to be a cash game drill or an MTT, etc.? Do I want this to be a six max format, heads up, etc.? What type of simulations do I want to apply? Like a general tree, the complex ones with more sizes, etc. What type of rake format? Stack depth, let's go to 100 here, for example. What position do we want to begin with? What type of action do we want? If we want to, we can add in certain specific scenarios, like blind on blind is what we've got here, and continue. So let's click confirm, and I'm going to click start training. And what this is going to do is this is going to keep throwing me into scenarios where I'm now in the blind on blind battle. So I've chosen both small blind and big blind for hero and villain. So it's just going to be all over the place. I could be small blind versus big blind. I could be big blind defense. You can set it up where you can be in 3-bet scenarios. You can set it up where you can be post flop. You can do whatever you want. It's absolutely phenomenal. If I wanted to, I could start becoming an absolute cyborg and start multi-tabling if I wanted to. But for today, let's just start with one. So I've got pocket jacks in the small blind. This is the scenario that I've been given. Do I want to do a full hand where I can do all the streets in this hand? Or do I want to just do this specific pre-flop scenario? It's up to you. So if I click street here, for example, what option do I want to choose? Well, I don't know. I've never used the study tool. What do I do? Try it, see what you think, and go from there. If you don't know the answers but physically want to use them as a study tool, which obviously you're going to inevitably want to do, you're not just going to want to click buttons and see what happens, is you can move your cursor over here to this study this spot. And if I was to click that, what that would do is that would then bring up in a separate tab or browser tab where it would actually show you your range of hands in that specific spot. You know where we went to study and then we could find a scenario that we could plug in. You can physically drill those spots from here. So for example, when you could click on study this spot and it would give you an idea of what your range would want to do. And then you can keep studying here next to it, which is quite cool. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is, what should we do? Should we fold? I don't think that looks like a good option. Let's go with raise. So when I click an action, just make sure you've got it here where the game will pause after each action, is I can go raise. So I'll click raise. And then what will happen here is it will tell me what percentage of the time I want to do that with this hand. And if I want to, I can also look at how often I want to do things with certain types of hands. So for example, here I can see that pocket jacks, this wants to open about 90% of the time, and then potentially consider a limping strategy. That's why it's got call here. And obviously we're never folding. And you can see what you want to start doing and how often you want to start doing it as well. What you can also do is, as I've clicked strategy here, is you can see, bring that up, that will bring you, this is kind of like the study tool is what I was showing you a second ago, is it will show you what your range of hands wants to do. So we had pocket jacks here. If I was to scroll over pocket jacks, we can see that, as the browser said, we'd be opening about 90% of the time and limping 10% of the time. You can see what your whole range might want to do, okay? You can also, let me just give me a second if I just take this off. If I move over to the right here, the range frequency tab here will just give me a basic idea of what my entire range would want to do. So I can see, for example, what percentage of the time I'm opening all my range, whereas if you're moving the cursor back over to pocket jacks, this is for the specific hand, okay? So that's quite interesting there. If I said, actually, I want to play a full hand, then I can just move it over to full hand, click continue, and now the hand will continue. So now we've moved over to post flop because the big blind has just called. Obviously, if they had raised or folded, it would have changed the scenario completely. But we've got post flop here. What do we want to do now? I don't know. Let's just start with a check, for example, in this scenario. That looks good. We've been approved. Excellent. Okay. See what villain does. They decide to bet. They bet 4.5 into 6. That makes the pot 10.5, as you can see. You can also see all the previous action of the hand at the top here. And we just move forward. So this is basically the simulator, as it were. So you can actually just specifically drill loads of different types of scenarios. If you want to do specific spots, you can do it. If you want to do overall formats where you're clicking on all the different positions, if you want to specify, it's absolutely fantastic. It's invaluable. It's absolutely fantastic. You want to sit here for 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day, drilling different types of scenarios every single day. It will make a massive difference in your game. It's just absolutely fantastic. So let's just finish this handout. So facing a large size, what do I want to do? Do I want to fold? I don't know. Do I want to go all in? I don't know. If you have no idea what to do, try and figure it out. You can also add a cheat mode where you can actually, the game will give you a bit of a help mode, but we're not going to use that today, okay? So let's continue as a call. And continuing as a call is a complete mistake. How do I know that's a mistake? Because I've been told it's a mistake, obviously. This is one thing that's really, really good with these types of drills, is it's going to absolutely just tell you what the right answer is and what the wrong answer is, and what percentage of the time you would be doing each option. So for example, had I folded here, it would have wanted to have folded 100% of the time versus this particular size. If I say to myself, oh, okay, well, you know, what does my whole range want to do in this particular spot? I can start having a look, and I can just see, you know, what parts of my range would want to call, what parts of my hand would want to fold. I can look at the strength or weakness of my specific hand. I can look at what types of hands want to continue in different types of ways. On the right here, I can start looking at the range versus range, etc., 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 etc. It's absolutely amazing as a study tool. It's just absolutely fantastic. So let's moving on. So the next part is the range builder. So with the range builder, what this is you can actually, so say for example, you're in a spot. So we got blind on blind here, for example, you open the small blind, okay? What type of range would I want to open in the small blind? Or if had I opened the small blind, what range would the big blind want to defend with, and how? This is where you can start using the range builder. Let's keep it on easy here. And what it will do is it's going to ask you, what range of hands do you think you should open in this particular spot you've given me? And you answer it. So you literally start dragging here. I say, oh, I might open ace-9 suited 65% of the time, as an example. Let's do that. And I'll do the same for all these different scenarios. And I'll fold everything else. Obviously, this is going to be wrong, but what you can do, but this isn't good for the scenarios that I've chosen. But as an overall strategy, you can see that on the left here, I've obviously missed loads of different types of opens. I've missed aces, I've missed ace-king suited, etc., 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 etc. But what I've done here is I can say, oh, I thought I was supposed to open ace-8 suited 65% of the time. Actually, looking over to the right side, ace-8 suited is supposed to open 100% of the time. And this is where you can just start learning what ranges should be doing, because you're trying to learn and basically tell the computer, this is like a test. The computer's asking you what hands you should be opening. You're telling it with this range explorer, and then it will give you the answer and just tell you how well you did and what type of hands. So I made lots of mistakes here. There was loads of hands I should have opened that I didn't. I'm folding way too much, for example. I'm not opening the hands I should be. It's really, really good practice. It's absolutely fantastic. Okay. What you can also do with the practice mode is when you've done sessions. So say, for example, I've done like a practice session. I can click on here. I can look at the session I did, look at the hands this is the one I just did, obviously the pocket jacks hand. But I can look at the options I did and review them, which is really, really, really good as well. Moving over to analysis then, or analyze, is one of the other absolutely fantastic options with Wizard is when you go to analyze here. So say, for example, you're playing on different formats, is what you can do is you can actually upload your sessions. So for example, on here, I've got click and paste hand histories. So say, for example, I have a hand, I have a session history from PokerStars, and I've got my PT4 there. You can copy and paste your hand histories and put them into this. And what will happen is all your hands will come up here, and then you can actually look at the hands that you've played and analyze them and just say, look, like, so for example, you might say, right, I played 500 hands at Zoom 25 today. I've uploaded them from my PT4 on PokerStars through this here onto the GTO Wizard platform, and you can physically look at the hands you've played and how you've played them, and it will tell you how much EV you've lost, or how well you've played, or what other options you should have used. So this is another really, really, really good tool that you can get from Wizard. It's absolutely fantastic. Just another disclaimer though, again, as a free user, you're limited to the practice mode options that you can use, the amount of hands you can play. You're limited to the certain scenarios, like for example, like post flop, etc., and you're limited to how many hands you can analyze per day, etc. So again, the better package that you purchase, obviously the more options you're then allowed to use with GTO Wizard. There are lots of other different things you can do with Wizard, but this is just some of the primary main options that you can do and you can choose from. And just honestly, guys, like, I'm going to use myself as an example here. I'm just going to real talk you for just 1 second, okay? It doesn't matter how good or how bad you are at poker. It doesn't matter how exploitative or how strategic you want to apply your strategies. It's really important that you're finding some kind of study tool to always improve at your game. So like we said, whether that's coaching, whether that's doing solver work yourself, whether that's working with friends and communities and groups, whether you're going through Leak Finder on Poker Tracker 4, however you find a way to study is up to you, okay? But in terms of like value for money, GTO Wizard, it ticks the boxes for me, and it's just absolutely elevated my game, and I really enjoy it. Maybe I'm just a bit of a nerd and a bit of a cave dweller, but I've really enjoyed and found massive improvements in my game, and all the amount of leaks I used to have. A lot of them have been plugged from this piece of software. It's just absolutely fantastic, guys. It really is. So if you're physically asking the question to yourself, I want to study but I don't know how to study, this is a really good platform for you. If you're a losing player, or if you're break even and you're frustrated and you want to improve at the game, this really is an option that you should seriously consider, and is extremely good value for money. So if you are thinking about purchasing GTO Wizard, because I'm an affiliate partner, I've got a 10% link, which is over there. So that link will be in the description as well, okay? But when you're thinking about packages to purchase, again, just remember that it depends what type of specialist you want to look into, like MTTs, where it's spin and goes, heads up, sit and goes, etc., cash games, whatever it is. You can choose the type of plan that you want, whether it be starter, premium, etc., and it will tell you what types of options you get in all the different levels, entry levels of your plan. The 10% discounts for new users only. However, one thing I would suggest is if you're really interested in using this software as a first time user and thinking about purchasing something, I probably recommend doing the annual subscription, because you get 10% off. Yeah, so don't get 10% off for 1 month, get 10% off for a year. It's absolutely fantastic. For example, as a premium user, for a month you save $9, whereas the premium user purchasing an annual subscription, you save yourself closer to like $80 or $90, something like that. It's really good. It's really good, and something to think about. So yeah, GTO Wizard. I mean, do you want to become a wizard? I do. This has absolutely helped me, and I really think it would help you as well. So get involved and have a look. Just to finish, again, if you like the content, as always, we will be doing some more gameplay tomorrow. I will be doing some more 2NL for the mini challenge, and then afterwards we'll be probably doing maybe some 25 or some 50NL games in the next few days as well. So as always, thank you so much. Please subscribe. Please leave your comments. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this video and GTO Wizard, whether you've used it and what your feedback is towards the software. So anyway, thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one.